think definitely coming from like an American perspective of like freedom of religion, I'm like, where the hell would you like regulate that or ban that without it literally just being Islamophobic?
Maybe I'm just salty, but talk about a boring topic. Everybody here is lefty, and everybody here is gonna agree that this policy is bad. Maybe I'm just salty, but this sounds like it's gonna be a subject.
I
So,
think it's
keep
a
going.
good policy. I think that women should stop tempting men, and I think that it's a
Wait,
good thing. I
no,
think
no. If
that
Wait,
women
then
stop
wait, if
tempting
you
men,
agree
then
with
it should be the complete opposite of the policy. You should want them to enforce wearing full body garb.
yeah.
they're
Tom,
not
are you
enforcing it.
memeing right now?
No,
Are you doing a Jordan Peterson?
I think he's memeing.
I know, but like
Well,
his
I
meme was
mean,
opposite.
kind of.
Maybe
no.
tempted.
I
So.
think
All
that
right, well,
women
Tom,
should
go ahead.
stop tempting men so much, but I suppose I wouldn't want the government to enforce that.
Okay, so I really want to focus in on this.
Wait, why wouldn't you want the government to enforce it? The government's like an arbiter of morality, and you think it's immoral. Why are you against the government enforcing it, Tom?
I also think it's immoral to lie. I don't want the government to stop everybody and find out whether or not they're telling the truth all the time.
What does that do with lying? What?
You just said that you think that the government is supposed to enforce morality. I think
Yeah,
it's immoral
talk
to
about
lie. I
morality.
don't want the government to enforce whether or not or arrest people for lying.
Okay. Does anyone want to respond to that?
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if I have a direct response to Tom's position, but the government doesn't enforce morality. That's ridiculous. No, absolutely not.
So like men and women, and I'm not gonna go like full, I guess, what do you call it, red pill or whatever. But like the more I think about this, okay, the more I think that like women use their sexuality like as an advantage over men a lot of the times. But then if they're called out on it, it's kind of sexist, right? Like it's wrong to point that out. And especially like, yeah, like we'll go full Jordan Peterson, like especially like in the workplace, like a woman can wear like a very low cut shirt and you walk by and she obviously she wants you to recognize that she has nice breasts and or she'll wear like tight pants and she wants you to see that she has a nice butt, but you walk by and you're like, hey, really nice tits today. Like you're gonna get in trouble for that, right? Like that
Tom,
now this is sexual
Let's
harassment.
talk about Venezuela.
Oh God!
No, hold on.
Inflation, guys.
Good topic. I like this topic.
Okay,
Red alert.
I have a question for you. So what you've done here, I mean, I agree with some level of the descriptive statements you've made about like the world in general. However, I feel like one of the things that you've done here, it may just because you weren't given enough time to speak, is something similar to what Jordan Peterson does. Is you've done the analysis, you've like sort of like picked apart like different. Okay, these are different mechanisms in society, and you have sort of suggested that there's a
prescriptive statement
without the prescriptive statement, right? So, do you have a prescriptive statement in that regard?
So not really. What I would say is that like if we, and I went over this on my channel recently, but like I would say that overall we kind of all consent to like a certain amount of like sexual harassment and things like that, and that maybe we shouldn't make the biggest deal out of it when we say like, well, we're more likely to get sexually harassed the more that we wear clothes that are sexually revealing, right?
Oh boy.
And so this is kind of like saying like we get in the cars, we know that there's going to be car wrecks, we don't want there to be car wrecks, but just because there's car wrecks, we don't stop getting in cars, right? We know there's going to be sexual harassment the more sexually revealing clothes we wear, but we're not going to stop wearing sexually revealing clothes.
Oh boy.
I mean, yeah. So there's the sort of like, I guess, long end like utility side, the utility of wearing revealing clothes versus like the negatives from it. But then there's also more of like the principled underpinnings, like the freedom to wear whatever your clothes and being able to, you know, respect your right to not be like, you know, have your like sometimes personal autonomy when it comes to like assault, but also just general like well-being, you know, violated by people harassing you. I think a useful prescription to this, it would be that like analyzing like where this really stems from, and where I would say this stems from is the fact that the social gender role of a woman is seen as the arbiter of sexuality in our current society. So the way by which you would address this, you would suppose, would be through things like intersectional feminism, through things like reducing gender roles in society, and just generally reducing the influence, expanding what it means, or what it's okay to be a man or woman or whatever. Basically targeting the root cause of this, which is the gender roles, because I don't think there's any sort of like inherent, like, I guess, supposed biological cause to one group of people being like harassing people with sexual clothing, and when they wear it, then it's not as big of a deal. Like it stems from gender roles mostly. That's at least the way I look at it. So my prescriptive analysis.
Are you talking about abolishing gender? Is that the prescription?
Well, no, that's an extremely long-term goal. I think the short-term things that we can really do in our day-to-day lives, I suppose, to or over a series of decades, because this isn't something that's going to be solved over day-to-day, is sort of keep going in the way that the gender role of woman has changed over the past few decades, right? In the 50s, what it meant to be a woman was extremely narrow, right? The type of clothing you wore, what type of life you led, the way you spoke to people, how your appearance was in general, that was extremely narrow. And then over just like a few decades, the definition of that has expanded massively. One of the key ways we can look at this, that I talked about on stream just like a few days ago, is, for example, the clothing that you're allowed to wear, right? Some people can even make the argument that nowadays there is unisex and men's clothing, right? So we've seen a massive expansion in the definition of what's okay to be a woman and what type of behavior is acceptable. We have seen an expansion to a lesser extent, I would say, for what it means to be a man. And we need to keep going in that regard and act, or sort of apply more just general progressive cultural values when it comes to gender. And then in the long term, through the effect of the gender roles becoming, more fluid and less concrete, we will see a reduction in the fact that one specific gender is labeled the arbiter of sexuality, and therefore issues like you've identified would arise less.
So
yeah,
I'm gonna jump in here for a hot second. Don't worry, we will get to the rest of you. So Tom, buddy, pal. So. First of all, let's start off this way. This idea that women will be more likely to be sexually harassed depending on their clothing. First of all, it doesn't matter what a woman is wearing, right? Within our society, yes, she will be harassed, unfortunately, right? This society and all others.
Do you not think it's more likely if they're wearing?
Hold on, let me finish my point. No matter what she is wearing, no matter how quote unquote pretty or fuckable she is, right? She's going to be harassed. This is a thing that happens within our society. And then, but we can understand that even if a woman was walking down the street completely naked, we get that doesn't actually give anyone the right to harass her, to touch her, to assault her, right? Can we agree that?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I'm not putting those words in your mouth. I want to be clear. I'm not putting those words in your mouth. I'm just getting that point out there, right? So we can understand that that's the case, right? So when we go down this line of reasoning, saying that, well, you kind of are tempting, right? Then that's excusing the abuse, right? That this is your fault, and or maybe men can get their act together, right? And understand that women aren't their property, that women aren't there for them to comment on, to argue on, to rate, to put down when they reject their sexual advances, and certainly not to touch inappropriately. Right. And again, I'm not trying to put all those words in your mouth, but I'm saying that this argument leads down that path. That's my response to you.
Go. Sure. Okay. So I feel like we're like conflating sexual harassment and like sexual assault here, right? Like once you start touching somebody, it's a little bit different than sexual harassment.
I'm including all those things under the ban. That's why I listed all those things, like all those things. Sexual harassment, once again, like doesn't matter what the woman happens to be wearing at the time, right? She could, in fact, walk into a room naked. That doesn't give anyone the right to harass her, right?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So I'm not saying that it gives anybody the right to do anything. If I leave my doors unlocked, it doesn't give anybody the right to break into my house. Now, if you come up to me afterwards and say, hey, dude, maybe you shouldn't leave your doors unlocked anymore, I wouldn't be like, hey, that's victim blaming. Don't tell me not to leave my doors unlocked. I'll leave my doors unlocked if I want to. It's my decision, right? you can say like, hey, well, you're more likely to get broken into if you leave your doors unlocked. Like it makes it a little bit easier for people. Or you might be it make it seem like you're inviting people to come break into your house, right?
No.
No.
Interesting analogy.
So,
Yeah, so real
okay.
quick, also, if you leave your doors unlocked, that's actually technically a lesser
Wait,
charge.
can I
at your
address?
well, just 1 second.
It's too many people talking.
If you had locked your doors, that is breaking and entering. That is a more severe charge than if you had just left your doors unlocked. So just a point of contention. I don't know if count that for what you will, but
I don't understand your point.
What's that?
I don't understand your point. What? How? So what?
Address the analogy, yeah, because he's trying to say that like just because the person's still in the wrong for breaking into someone's house who is unlocked, who left their door unlocked, that wouldn't mean you wouldn't say to the person, why do you leave your door unlocked? You probably shouldn't do that. Not that I agree with this analogy. It's just you weren't addressing it with that statement.
Yeah. And like, I would respond to that by saying, like, still, like, it's kind of what I think Rose was alluding to where you're at analyzing something and noticing like something like a correlation that may be happening, but not offering a solution. So, like, even if I were to concede the point that if women or people in general were to wear a more promiscuous clothing, that it would increase their likelihood of being sexually harassed or like abused in some way, that still is like, that's like kind of leaving something to hang thing, like, still okay. Like you should still be able to wear promiscuous clothing without being like harassed. That's not the fault of the person like wearing that clothing. It's like unless you have a solution to that, I don't see like the point of bringing it up. But I would like,
I'm not saying fault. I'm saying
no, I know you're not saying that.
responsibility within there. So I'm saying like,
Yeah.
I'm saying that if I'm going to wear sexual clothing, it seems as though like there is somewhere from wearing a potato sack to being butt naked, somewhere in between there's a point where we can say like, yes, this is sexual clothing or it's sexual signaling, regardless of who it's to. I'm not saying that like you're walking down the road and you're sexually signaling to literally everybody, but we can say that there is a point that you are probably sexually signaling.
Yeah,
And
you are. Okay, yeah, sure. That's the thing. But like again, like my point is like you're noticing like these signs of things that like may be happening. But again, like what's the solution? We can say that the outcome of that may being you being sexually harassed, but that does that mean that the responsibility or even a little bit of responsibility is on the person wearing promiscuous clothing? I would say I
yeah,
disagree. No, I wouldn't.
yeah,
No.
I
Do
disagree.
you have the right to leave your door unlocked without somebody coming in unwantedly?
yes.
No.
Okay, then why can't somebody walk around naked without somebody like sexually harassing them?
They can. I'm not saying they don't have the right. I'm saying that they have responsibility. There's a massive difference. You guys are conflating a lot of things here.
I think all he's saying is that you could potentially. I think all he's saying is that you can point out to that person that, hey, maybe this is a bad idea and could end up with you getting fucked. No pun intended.
Yeah, increase the likelihood. That's the thing. Like I
I don't
get.
think you do have the right for walking around in the nude, do you? It's indecent exposure, right?
You don't.
Well, I mean, this is like a hypothetical.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
I do want to sorry because I did real quick. I did want to ask something because I thought Tom made an interesting point about like compliments. So fuck, this is gonna sound very memey, but do you guys think that there is any credence to the idea that we could expand or normalize some like competence, like for example, like somebody like a dude's walking down the street with like a bulge in his pants, right? Like, why is it not acceptable for me to say, "Hey, dude, nice bulge, nice cock," right? Like, could you maybe
You
expand
do that more often.
within
Yeah, it
society
should.
to where like even and you could do the same like for women? Do you think that that could be something that's possible or that we should do, or do you think that it's perfect the way it is?
Well,
Was that an
should
open
and
question or
shouldn't is
was that
very subjective. It depends on like
No,
the
I know
person.
based off
I
of what
think
you
the problem I could see arising from that is then you get into the problem of if this is happening in, for example, the workplace, then you have the problem of power dynamics where if, for example, your boss says, "Hey, nice tits," there's kind of a bit of an implication under there, and there's a very heavy power differential there. Like, that could be problematic, but I don't know if that means that you couldn't allow it maybe in public.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that Marx is getting at here, which is has to do with the thing I mentioned previously, is what he's doing is he's balancing out the sexual aspect across the gender roles, which is something I talked about, right? You're broadening the definition of gender roles because both genders are sexualized. None of them is particularly sexualized. None of them is particularly victimized when it comes to sexualization. So yeah, there's, I guess, a broader definition of gender roles, and in the end, you're going to end up with most likely like less harassment being directed at any one gender in that regard. So yeah, that's just I think that's what Marx is getting at mostly, which is it's an interesting point, and it's something that I talked about previously. Another thing I can add a little bit to just bring a little bit more nuance into this, and then I'm going to talk about the example that Tom Foolery gave with his house thing, is that just because you wear revealing clothing or you don't, it's not necessarily like such an easy direct relationship between wearing types of clothing and the risk of being harassed and sexually assaulted. And I know you took issue with them being lumped together in one, Tom Foolery, but there is a very heavy link between the two of them. There have been multiple studies suggesting that certain, what's it called, what do you call one of the person, what do you call them, like a sexual assault or a sexual harasser, they may target someone because they're wearing revealing clothing, or they might target people who are wearing very concealing clothing, because they're likely to believe that this person is lacking in self-esteem, for example. They may be less likely to report the incident, and a whole lot of other things. So there's a lot more nuance here to just like revealing clothing, more likely to be subject to sexual harassment or assault or whatever. The last thing I want to talk about is your equivalence with the house. And I think one of the key things here that is very necessary to distinguish is that there isn't really any societal pressure for you to leave your door unlocked in your home. However, due to the gender roles that exist right now and the fact that we place a lot of values on women's bodies and their sexuality when it comes to how we value them as people, society sort of indirectly, pushing them towards wearing this type of clothing where they are appreciated, or where a focal point of their character and the way they're valued is their physical appearance. So that's one of the key things that is very, different here. And I like looking at issues such as this, like crime as a societal issue. And the difference between these two is that in one of them, there's societal pressure for them to do that. And then there's societal pressures against that may occur from that. While leaving your door unlocked, there isn't really any societal pressure not to, leave your door locked. So that's one of the key differences there.
So when it comes to men and the gender role that they play, we say to men hey, look, you don't have to be the strong masculine person. Women, stop trying to depend on men to be that security for you. You need to be that for yourself, right? And we try to break down men's gender roles and make and really just deconstruct it almost completely. Women's gender roles, completely fine. You want to continue to wait for the man to make the first move. You want to continue to be sexy. You want to continue to use your beauty as your key or as your value in society. That's perfectly fine. Men, we need to completely tear down your gender roles and hit the refresh button, right?
So where's that question? I'm sorry.
Sorry. Hold on. If I'm understanding, first of all, Rose, I think you're doing a fantastic job. Just got to put that out there. Friday Living, I do see your hand. I'm going to go to you soon. And thank you for joining us. Really appreciate that. But to you, Tom, so are you saying that women's gender roles are never being re-examined? In fact, that's literally what's been happening for decades and decades.
No, so their gender roles are to I would say that men's gender roles are almost completely deconstructed, whereas women's are more hey, take on masculine gender roles, take on what were considered masculine gender roles, like being leaders, being aggressive, being a leader, those sorts of things, right? But lots of women's gender roles are not being deconstructed, whereas I feel like almost all men's gender roles are being deconstructed.
I feel like
God, I view that the exact
women's
The exact
bodies.
opposite of what I
Yeah,
was saying.
yeah. So I feel like, and I'm definitely gonna let you all enjoy. We're gonna tackle this. I feel like women's bodies in generals are constantly being deconstructed. All their whole identities, everything they're doing is being deconstructed, right? And criticized.
What do you mean their bodies are being deconstructed?
No,
What does that
I
mean?
mean, deconstructed as in consumed, as being like rated, as being seen like this. Your body is not good enough, right? It doesn't meet these standards, right? And these evolving standards that you have to keep up with. And if you aren't keeping up with them, well, there's something wrong with you, right? Then you're the next woman, or a next girl who's gonna be made to feel like shit because she hasn't been keeping up with these things, right? So I think their generals are kind of, like, again, like for instance, like how to be a mother and also a worker, right? That's always being fought over within the media, right? Especially for women of, especially when she mixed class into this, women of lower class, I mean like middle and poverty, working class, working class level, right? Their roles as mothers are constantly being questioned, and they're being criticized and made to feel less than for trying to balance these things, right? With a society that doesn't even help them. And then I just want to tackle quickly your point. I'll let you respond to everything I'm saying, and then I'm going to let Friday Living in, and then I'm going to let everyone else in as well. Okay, I just want to. All right. So then I just want to finally tackle that point about like using your face, right? Like using your beauty, right, for whatever. Like women are using their beauty, right? Quote unquote using their beauty, because so often we take away other avenues for success for these women, right? That like so often. Women, brilliant women who could offer so much to the world, right, are relegated or discouraged from taking on other roles, other maybe more respectable roles or whatever, right? More productive roles, if you will, because just how society is, because we devalue them in general. So to say like you want to continue using your beauty, well, like we put women in a corner that they have to use their bodies, right? Those bodies that we're constantly deconstructing, they have to use their bodies to get ahead in life. And that's only for some, and that's only for a few of them, right? Not even all can do that. So you can respond to everything I said. I'm going to let Friday Living in after that, and then we'll go back to everyone else, okay?
Real quick, can I just say that I think it's kind of fucked up that we don't have a woman on the panel right now when we're talking about this?
Well,
like I wish we did.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
It's a struggle, man.
It's a struggle. But go ahead.
I feel like you just agreed with everything I said. So like what I'm saying is that men continue to have less, or their gender roles are becoming less and less, while women's have things added to their gender roles. And it sounds like that's what you just said as well, that like they're continuing to keep most of what their gender role was before with a lot more added. Men's gender roles are becoming less and less. And then like using these things within society. So like men being strong, men being physical, men wanting to fight, or, lots of those things are considered now like toxic masculinity, right? Or, these, when I say deconstructed, I mean like these are things that we're picking apart and trying to get rid of, while there aren't parts of femininity that we're picking apart and getting rid of. We're just adding more to what their gender norms are allowed to carry.
All right. I'm gonna let other people tackle this. Don't worry, Rose. You're definitely on the list. I just want to do two things. One, I'm gonna give an outro to George Nato. Thank you, George, for being here. As always, we're thankful for having you. Did you want to say something? I don't know.
Yeah, just thank you for having me. It was a pleasure as always. Politics.gg. Come and join the conversation. It's fun making a cringy race realist cry. So come and have fun.
Exclamation point do be in chat to get to that to find that link. But thank you so much, George. You have a wonderful night. Okay, so we'll go to Friday Living, right? And then we'll go to Mark's, and then we'll go back to Rose. Okay, Friday Living, please.
Hey, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so As an ex-Muslim myself, I kind of go back to that burqa issue because when we were studying, right, they talk about the hijab and it's a covering and things like that. And you have to cover yourself. And we're talking about gender roles. They go to extreme with that with Islam. You're not even supposed to look at a woman. You know, you're supposed to look at the ground if a woman comes into the room and things like that. So it's just interesting they want to ban the burqa and things, but I think it's like an Islamic phobic thing more than it is trying to give them freedom. Because can see where they're coming at. We're like, oh, we need to free these women because we think they're oppressed because they're being forced to wear these things. But a lot of those women think they're free wearing these things. You know, they feel like they're outside the normal having to wear makeup and having to dress up and things like that, and just have a burqa on and be able to not be judged by their looks.
Okay. Well, thank you. Let's go to Marks and then the turkey. And we'll go to Rose.
Yeah, and also Tom, previously the burqa argument, like of how like wearing more like revealing or promiscuous clothing can increase your likelihood of being sexually harassed. I'm sure there's some correlation there, but it's not like a one to one, right? Like even in Muslim countries where women are forced to wear the burqas, like for example, like obviously Middle Eastern, like North Africa, more North African countries, the rape rates there are incredibly high, even though the women mainly partake in the Muslim religion. So I wouldn't even necessarily say it's a one to one relation.
I wait for the day that I'm going to be the one that's in a 1v whatever situation. That sounds like fun. So one of the things I want to throw off right off the bat is that I think that in general, just Tom, if you make more predictions, that'd be super helpful, I suppose, to get more so many descriptive ones, and it's confusing for the rest of the panel, I suppose. Like exactly.
Before you respond, I've said like when we come to like how we deconstruct masculinity, I feel as though it'd be helpful to do the same within femininity and how we react to these social norms.
Yep, that's one of my next points. Before I get to that, I want to point out something Mark said that I don't know how many other people picked up on, but you said that like sort of the intersectional change of gender role should have sort of like stayed around the second wave. I just want to put that out there. We probably don't want to shift the discussion to that because that's to have a more discussion on gender roles and stuff like that, and what ways we want to move, like social progress when it comes to gender issues. I'm happy any day to defend third wave intersectional feminism when it comes to that. So that's something that I'm putting out there. Now, the thing that I think like a statement you made, Tom, that I suppose like fundamentally displays maybe a perception of like slight towards like men in society that I think we need to unpack more, is that when you talked about, for example, women being, it's becoming more acceptable for them to act masculine, you characterize them. However, when we talked about the other thing, when you talked about, being a man and how it's more okay to, for example, be more feminine or be, weaker in society or like stuff like that in general, you characterize that as the narrowing of what it means to be a man. I'm just curious why, pretty much similar behavior for both gender roles, why you characterize one as an expansion and one as a narrowing of what it means to be acceptable.
So I don't think that we're like actually adding anything to men. So it's not like we're saying like, hey, be more compassionate, be better with your child rearing. I don't know. Like, I'm not sure what be more beautiful. I don't know what it is that we would add to men's roles. What is it that you think that we're adding?
Yeah, I mean, I have a general underlying sentiment you have in that what it means to be a woman has expanded a lot more over the past few decades than what it means to be a man. That's why there's a lot of discourse right now surrounding toxic masculinity, because we haven't seen the same expansion of what it means to have the two different gender roles. So things I
disagree with you there. I disagree with you there, Rose. Yeah. Like, I think feminism has actually opened up all kinds of paths for men, like as well, right? Because there is a thought that and it still exists today, but like it's been disappearing, that men can't be caretakers, right? That instead they have to be just the providers, right? The fact that we have the concept of like the stay-at-home husband, right? That's an expansion of the gender role. Right.
Yep.
The fact that we have men who are, I guess, allowed to take care of their kids. Like we're that men should be competent in this area, right? Be competent within the household, like taking care of the household, to be competent to like cook, right? To be competent to do all those things that we usually would say, well, of course, it wasn't even a question before, right? But now it's a question. Hey, like, how are we going to split this, right? The household, like it expands like what marriage means for us, and expands what masculinity means, right? It doesn't mean like I come home, right, and like dinner is ready for me. I sit down, I like drinking a beer, watching TV, while my wife, who may have been working herself that day, right, has come home, done all of this, and is taking care of the kids, and eat, and then I'll go to sleep. So that's an expansion of gender roles, I would say. But I'm sorry, I did interrupt you, Rose.
There are some expansions. It's just I think there's more.
Okay. Yeah. No. Wait.
Sorry,
can I just
go ahead.
respond to what Prime said?
Fine.
Yeah, okay. So the statement I made was that men's gender roles have expanded. They undoubtedly have. I just don't think they have expanded as much and as rapidly as the gender role of women over the past few decades. So one of the examples, I'm going to hinge heavily on one of the things you talked about. So stay at home versus have a career. Which of the two do you think is more just like generally prevalent or more acceptable in society? The stay at home dad or the career like mom?
Well, okay, so it depends on what the metric you're judging here. Are you saying has it been widely accepted by society, or that we've been introducing these concepts in, right? And if you're talking about like the adoption by society, then certainly the career woman has. But like if you're talking about just introducing new concepts, right, into masculinity, into what we consider traditional gender roles, right? If you're talking about that, then yes, there's a whole bunch of concepts that have been introduced. Now, whether again, if society have actually grabbed onto them, that's a different story. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and that's the point I'm making fundamentally. Is that? Oh, sorry. I'll let you speak in just a minute. Stardust? How do I say your name?
Stardust.
Oh, yeah, Stardust. Yeah, you can go ahead. You can finish what you're saying.
We'll go to Rose, then Salty, Sam, and then you, Stardust. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing I was going to say, that was the only point I was making, right? When you expand the gender roles, it's obviously like a multi-step process. It has to first be like, I guess, theoretically conceivable for a lot of people that this is an acceptable thing. Then you have to work for a lot of people's like individuals, like, inherent biases that they have towards certain behaviors. Then you have to work towards like people expressing them and people actually, taking on this. There's like a whole lot of different steps in the process when you normalize something socially. And the only point I was making is that the classification we have for what it means to women is a lot farther down that process for a wider range of things than the one for men is. Of course, they're both growing. Of course, I'm in favor of both of them growing. I, in the long term, would see gender roles practically have no significance on our day-to-day life or whatever. But yeah, that was the only point I was making there. There was the thing I pointed out for Tom, but I have been speaking for quite a while. But yeah, there was the just quickly respond to what Tom said before. What are the things I would like to add to male gender roles? Well, things like, for example, making it more common to have stay-at-home husbands, making it more acceptable for men to express their feelings generally, making it more acceptable for men to have like feminine interests, making it more acceptable for men to appear in a feminine way, wear feminine clothing, for example, have makeup. There's like a very large number of things that I would believe like you would classify just general good things, because men will have ability to express themselves in a wider range of ways. Those are some of the things I would add to that to answer the question. But yeah, fundamentally the thing I want to get at was why you characterize the expansion of men as like a contraction and the expansion of the woman general as an expansion, and why there was that disagreement there. But
you ended up agreeing with that, right?
With what?
You ended up agreeing that like men's gender roles are lessened while women's gender roles are expanded.
I don't think they've lessened. I think they have expanded, but not as rapidly as that of women.
So you think
that's what me and Prime were talking about.
Well, right, but I wouldn't say that they're gaining as many things as they're losing. I would say that they're losing more things than they're gaining.
I'm sorry. My problem in this conversation right now is that like this is like really nebulous. Like they're gaining more, they're losing. Like unless we're like literally listing out these things, right? Like it's just like a nebulous feeling of like how gender roles are sort of shifting society. Do you understand what I'm saying, Tom? Like this is like, are they gaining more? Are they losing more? But like Like we
Can
literally
I
have
add
to
some
sit down.
structure to this real quick then, Prime? Can I add some structure to this? So I think maybe the reason why you're thinking that women are expanding more and and men aren't really expanding into anything that's beneficial is because men are always in these positions of power and women are always in are in these positions of servitude. So you don't really have anywhere for men to expand into that's beneficial or gives them any kind of an upper hand. You have women that are expanding into those positions that are actually being given those opportunities, whereas men have always had those opportunities. And really, the only way for them to go is basically to have these expansions into more duties and things that aren't seen as particularly powerful. That's
I
where you're seeing that change.
I like
I
that.
would actually disagree
Um,
with that.
Oh,
Oh, actually, you go straight. Sorry. You go.
yeah. Hold on.
yeah, so I do want to
Go ahead.
I
Go
would
ahead.
like
Go ahead.
to also contribute to this conversation. Um I see what you're saying as far as and I agree with Clarice here. There's the reason why you see this expansion is because it's generally women weren't given these opportunities before, right? And obviously there is like where would men expand into? So to respond to that, I think yes, we're seeing men's role kind of expand in a lesser way. And in the places that I would see that is like paternity leave, right? Um, like recognition of male sexual assault, things like that, right? These are real issues that are slowly being drawn more attention to, right? All I get that it's not anything near what females are right now experiencing as far as like growth of their role, right? But it is a process, and I think you will see more of it because we've already seen an expansion of these things, and there are people like there's the men's liberation movement, which is supported by a lot of feminists, and they advocate um for men getting paternity leave equal to women, and men getting taken more seriously when they report assault, when they report harassment, things like that. So
Let's go to
Yeah,
Salty.
agreed.
Let's go to Salty Sam, who's been waiting very patiently, and then we'll let Tom respond to all of this.
Yeah. So one thing I just wanted to address real quick that I think we've kind of struggled to really address is I think Tom actually raised a really interesting analogy with the comparing leaving your door unlocked to a whatever we would deem as a significant enough degree of sexual clothing. And I was kind of trying to figure out, because I knew there must be some way of kind of refuting that. And I think the best way to kind of explain why that analogy doesn't fit so well is because with leaving your door unlocked, you're essentially either choosing to leave your door unlocked and gain essentially no benefit from it and leave yourself vulnerable, or you're choosing to lock your door, which is really simple, and you're not losing anything by doing it, and you're just gaining something. Whereas with if you were to remove the option of wearing sexual clothing or anything like that, you're essentially removing an entire form of expression for women. And in addition to this, another way that you could kind of refute this analogy is because I would strongly expect that there would be a correlation um, between like a woman who the majority of society currently would deem as more attractive, and those who are deemed more attractive being more likely to be sexually assaulted or sexually harassed, and that's not something that you have any choice over. So I think it's just not really an analogy that um, that actually makes sense to me.
Hold on. No,
okay,
we've
so
already, like, for the most part, we've all already agreed that wearing more revealing clothing means that you're more likely to be sexually harassed. And that doesn't mean that, like, there's not going to be sexual harassment anyways. What we're talking about is
Yeah.
more likely. And when I say sexual
No, I
harassment,
agree.
I'm
And
saying
this is why
and who's
unwanted sexual advancements.
And
right?
this is
So,
why I was refuting it specifically by saying that it's disanalogous because of the fact that you're actually infringing on an entire form of expression for those women. So you're not choosing between this this binary be safer or be less safe with no losses really either way, with the leaving your door unlocked or not leaving your door unlocked. Whereas with clothing, clothing is a form of expression, and if you're limiting what a woman can wear, you're limiting their expression. So they're actually actively losing out by this by being safer in this sense.
yeah, sure. The hypothetical was only to explain like how we view it as far as like victim blaming or responsibility in these matters. It wasn't supposed to be like a full spectrum of all things encompassing sexual harassment or women's clothes.
We got it. Well, I'm going to go to start. I'll go to Stardust next. Yes, and then go ahead, Stardust.
Okay, so one thing I would say about this whole talking point about what people wear and things like that, as I heard Prime say earlier, when it comes down to it, it doesn't matter what you wear. It doesn't matter how you carry yourself. If somebody, what a rapist does, what an assaulter does, is they look for the most vulnerable person, and that doesn't matter what you wear, right? So, if you want to talk about like people expressing themselves, things like that, we could talk about how men can walk around without a shirt, right? And men can walk around without a shirt and they don't get sexualized to the same extent that a woman would get sexualized if she were walking around without a shirt, right? It's still not an invitation. It's not an invitation. Like what you wear is not an invitation for anybody to do what they want to you.
And to add to that, hold on. I just need to get this out there. Don't worry. And Tommy will be able to respond, and Ghosty, we want to hear from you as well. But to add to that, like clothes, skimpy clothes don't sexually assault you, right? Like men do the sexual assaulting, right? So like, yes, you can say that an outfit might increase the amount of negative attention directed towards a woman. But in the end, that outfit doesn't do the sexual assaulting. It's the men that do that, right? And so it's just the men that should be changing their behavior and not the clothes, right? Like the clothes aren't doing it. The women who put them on aren't doing it. They aren't actually asking to be hurt, right? It's the men who are actually doing the assaulting. So it's the men's behavior that needs to be changed, not the women.
And generally it goes back to when you again it like if you look at like the type of people that assault people, the type of people that exert their will on other people without their consent, those are people who view you as lesser than, right? They view you like livestock, essentially, right? It really doesn't matter what you wear. Like, yeah, people will make the argument like, oh, what were you wearing? You know, maybe you shouldn't have been wearing that. What were you doing? Maybe you shouldn't have been doing that, right? But at the end of the day, if somebody is not viewing you as an equal, then that's generally like, that's what it is, right? And I mean, another thing is like, men can wear like gym shorts, right? And like sweatpants. And how many times have we seen a bulge in that and not grab? Like, we don't do that. Like, it's not an invitation. It's not an invitation for me. It's not an invitation for me to grab you. It's not an invitation for me to grab you in any way, right? Or comment on you in any way, right? I'm not commenting on the.
But you internalize those feelings.
Let me finish. All right. I'm not commenting on like, I'm not going up to you in the workplace and commenting on it, right? I'm not going like, I'm not going up to you in the street and commenting on it, right? Not to the same extent that we see it in the opposite direction, right? So it's just these are like normal human social things, right? It's not even about assault at that point. It's like, just be a normal human. Like, don't be weird. Basically,
none of this is about assault whatsoever. We're talking about sexual harassment, and people keep making it bigger and bigger and bigger.
These arguments work for both.
There is an umbrella. Yes. Okay, so when you talk, when
it comes from the same place.
when we
Guys,
talk about
I've got
sexual,
like 100 notes here from like 1,000 things that I got to respond to. Like
Don't
at
worry,
some
don't worry.
point, I got to
You
get some
will.
words
Yes,
in.
yes. Don't worry, you will.
when you talk about sexual misconduct, right? There are levels, right? There's misconduct, there's harassment, there's assault, and these are all different levels, right? But
Sure.
you could say a lot of people will talk about rape and say sexual assault, right? Even though it's not specific, right?
Mhm.
When we talk about sexual harassment, people will, these are umbrella terms, right? And they kind of feed into each other. So I understand we're not talking about rape, we're not talking, about like specific physical contact, right? But somebody coming up to you and making a comment about like nice nips, bro, like that's not something that I would do. I apologize if you've experienced that in your life, but that's not, and it's something I would heavily discourage any female from doing, right? Just because you're, going for a run in the park with your shirt off doesn't mean like it's an invitation for me to say anything about your body.
Okay,
right? So yeah.
So I want to get Tom in here to respond to all this stuff. Then we'll let Ghosty in. But sure.
I mean, the problem here is now I'm going to go over 50 points, and on each one, there's going to be a disagreement.
Don't worry.
We're going to go around.
We're going to let you get them all out. We're going to let you get them all out, and then we can yell at you for being wrong on every single one of them. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So me, like on an interaction by interaction basis, I realize more and more that I do treat people differently based on how they look or how much they smile at me or, how pretty their eyes are or something like that. Right. Like and I do think that with women, they are just naturally perceived, or maybe not naturally, but to me, naturally perceived as better looking. So they're going to get those better vibes or nicer reactions just almost automatically. I'm not saying that toxic femininity is the same as toxic masculinity. I'm only pointing out that if there was toxic femininity, this is probably what it would be. Men's relations or men's roles have been like, don't be too domineering. You don't necessarily need to be the leader like in a relationship. You shouldn't be so aggressive in like finding women, but yet we're not like changing it to where women should go out and make the first move to find men. Men are still expected to wear gendered clothing, while like women are more able to kind of wear men's clothing or women's clothing. Men are not supposed to wear makeup. These are areas where women are more and more expanding into both gender roles, yet men are, for the most part, staying in their lane and just kind of decreasing on some of the gender roles that they have. No one's saying that it's an invitation just because you wear clothing that is more sexual. I'm saying that when you do this, if you understand that it is more likely, again, you can get sexually harassed no matter what you wear. But if we say that willingly know that it is more likely that you will get sexually harassed and wear it anyways, then somewhat you are consenting to a certain amount of unwanted advances. So I'll stop calling it sexual harassment so we can stop conflating a whole bunch of different things. Because I'm not talking about rape. I'm not talking about sexual assault or anything like that. And then the point that men should change their actions and not women. I think men should change their actions for sure. But I think that, again, the only thing that I'm pointing out is a responsibility factor. So like if I get in a car, again, I know people are going to get in accidents. I'm not going to be like, I'm not wearing a seatbelt. People should just drive better. People should just be safer drivers. I'm not wearing a seatbelt. Like, no, if I go flying through my window, I'm not like it's my fault for just not wearing a seatbelt because I know that this is a likely thing that could happen, that there can be bad drivers out there. And so I'm going to put on a seatbelt as a precaution. There you go.
Right.
Okay.
I
Oh,
agree
God.
that there needs to be
Can-
more burden on women to do things, so like to like make the first move, things like that, right? And that's something I think that will naturally occur as women feel more safe in spaces to make those moves, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
it's fine. I just need to get down this list. But thank
Yeah.
you so much, Stardust. So Ghosty has been waiting. Then we'll go to Rose and for Friday Living, and then Rose, and then Fanatic. Okay. But guys, can we like speed this up because I can't be here forever. I can't be here forever. So Ghosty.
Well, I mean, basically, just it's about common like respect to individuals. If you see somebody or like you're working with somebody, you should probably not assume that like commenting on their body is going to be interpreted in a positive direction. You should probably just assume that they might not like it. So you just need to be aware of like your comments to people, and how they might like negatively perceive them. That's basically it. Just giving people respect to how they might view themselves if they have insecurities or not.
Okay, thank you. Friday Living, Rose, then our good friend Mr. Fanatic.
Okay, one point I have against the whole like it depends on what they're wearing and stuff is like if we look at countries like where they're wearing niqab and body coverings, there's still high accounts of sexual assault and sexual harassment there, even though there's nothing being shown. They're wearing loose clothing and everything, so I don't think it matters.
Thank you.
You don't think it's more likely? That's all I'm saying. Is I'm not saying that. I've said numerous times, like you can get sexually harassed no matter what you're wearing, but I'm saying it is more likely if you wear revealing clothes. Do you disagree with that?
I disagree with that because they have no
Okay.
revealing clothes and they still get sexually harassed in the same amount.
That's hold on.
If they
The
put on any
same
shirt.
amount.
Just a
They
quick
go
address
get
to this.
dressed higher.
You
Okay.
can't really say that because I think the comparison to leaving your door unlocked actually does fit in this scenario. In that, if everyone locks their door, people houses are still going to get broken into, which is why specifically discredited that
Okay, so let's
analogy.
But
with,
I've said this so
I
many
don't want
times.
to focus on this
With the
analogy.
expression
We
part.
got to move on. Sorry, we got to move on down this list. Sorry. Don't worry. Okay. Well, we got to move on down this list. So,
Can I go after Fanatic, sorry?
maybe not because I don't have time. I don't have time to be here all day. So Roosevelt and then Fanatic.
Yeah, so a few points here. Again, I'm going to put more like I'm going to discredit some of the analysis that have been passed. The car thing analogy is, I think, is also disanalogous in the way that a lot of the reason why we wear the seatbelt is because accidents happen when driving, not because people are intentionally driving around trying to hit you with their car, right? So if that been the situation, have there been, like madmen driving around, like literally trying to like, hit as many cars as possible, then the action wouldn't be, oh, well, it's kind of your fault for not wearing a seatbelt. Then it would be, okay, the state needs to do something, or like whatever. We need an external party to stop the perpetrator of this violence, of this problem or whatever, from doing that thing. Or while with, like sexual assault, it's very clearly like an intentional thing that's taking place, right? It's not just like an accident that happens, I suppose, in that way. So that's one of the ways it's different. And then because the door analogy was brought up again, key difference here is the social pressures of having your the door locked versus women wearing that type of clothing. Society generally reinforces women to wear that clothing because we value women a lot of the ways by their appearance, as a society typically values women. So there's a pressure to do that. There's no pressure for you to leave your door unlocked. Furthermore, one thing, I guess I'm granting like an olive branch here to Tom. I think one of the issues why people are taking so much issue with like your statement of, oh, you're subjecting yourself to more risk, whatever. So typically you have like some form of responsibility. Even though I disagree with that in a lot of ways, most of which have been laid out already, I think another thing that should be done here is, once again, you need prescriptions for this, right? Are you going to say that, okay, so women shouldn't wear this clothing? Like, you're missing the next step. And that's what's, I guess, aggravating a lot of people on the panel, is because you're not saying that next step, and that type of ideology is used to justify a lot of things.
I've made the prescription over and over. The prescription is more responsibility. The understanding of this scenario, that is the prescription, to understand it and take responsibility for it at the same time. Wear all the sexual clothing. It means wear all the sexual clothing you want. with the understanding that you are consenting to a certain amount of sexual harassment at the same time.
I don't know if consenting is the right word to use there, and also that the word of like taking responsibility. I don't necessarily believe that's I acknowledge it's something could be a prescription. I'm not quite sure, but even then, there were the things I mentioned before, how it's not quite as simple as wearing revealing clothing makes you more likely to be like sexually harassed, assaulted, or whatever. There's conflicting research on that, so it's not that clear either. So there's a few issues with that. I want to go back to the thing that you and I have been arguing about most of the time, which is you saying that gender roles have been contracting for men. So you laid out a few examples for this. Number one, you said men are less dominant, which I'll get to in a second. And then the other examples you used were examples of clothing or makeup. Note that clothing or makeup is not something that has been like reduced or taken away from men. It's just something that men haven't expanded to yet. So that's not the same thing as saying that they're contracting because we don't have the same options in clothing or in makeup as what women do, for example. Now, when it comes to the less dominant thing, and you often bring up toxic masculinity, at least from my understanding of it, seems less to be like, like, don't do this thing. You shouldn't do this thing. You shouldn't be this. That's, what it mostly says is it's okay for you to be this other thing. It's okay for you to be more sensitive. It's okay for you to show weakness. It's okay for you to do yada, yada, yada. If anything, that to me is an expansion, the fact that we're focusing on toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity isn't necessarily a sort of like role that men fill so much as a restriction on what roles that men can fill. And through talking about toxic masculinity and addressing it, what you're actually doing is you're expanding the possible alternatives for men to be able to act. You're not preventing them from being toxically masculine or whatever in that regard. So I'm still waiting for an example of gender roles for men that have been contracting and that have been disappearing.
For you guys to keep saying that it's going to happen eventually or we're moving in that direction is not the same thing as it has happened or it is currently the way it is. We're talking about current societal norms right now. And for you to keep saying like, well, we'll get there eventually, like that's not the same thing.
But you said they were contracting. So I'm waiting for you to give me an example of them contracting.
Currently, I have given numerous examples, and
Can you
to
give
say
me one
that
again?
right.
Because I addressed them.
Yeah, let me pull this back up.
Okay. All right. Well, all right. Hurry up,
Oh,
and then because I need to move this along. I got to move this along. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't have time to be doing this all day. So go ahead.
So I put being leaders in a relationship, being the breadwinner, being more aggressive to find partners. Men are
okay. Let's take the ones you mentioned so far because okay. So once again, the clothing things, it's not something that's being stripped away from men. It's not less acceptable for men to wear any type of clothing. It just hasn't expanded in the same way that women's clothing is. So that's not a contraction by definition. Now, the other thing you talked about with being the leader of a relationship. Now, what you characterize that as men are no longer, like encouraged to be leaders of a relationship. What I would characterize that as, and what to me seems more accurate, is that men are free to not be leaders of the relationship, or free to not be necessarily the breadwinners, or for that not to be like the default modus operandi of how relationships function. So that to me just seems like an expansion of what it means and what it's allowed to be a man, not a contraction of it.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to Miss Fanatic. Miss Fanatic, I'd love to hear from you on this. Go ahead.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, I feel like this conversation, you guys are kind of like, I feel like tomfoolery. I wanted to come on here and steel man him, and then like right when I got on, he started saying like, well, no, so technically you're bearing the responsibility. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to steel man that. But ultimately, I do think that there should be a lot more nuance when it comes to these kind of conversations. I absolutely recognize like without
Salty,
even getting
can
it.
you mute your,
Salty, could you mute yourself, please?
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
I thought it was...
Please, Fanatic.
Yeah, without getting into like anything prescriptive at all, you can literally just point out that hey, like these are the things. There's a purpose in certain kind of clothing and the way that women will present themselves, which can be sexual. And
but
sometimes
there is a
on,
problem.
Let me finish. Can I?
Okay.
Come on, man. You know what I'm saying? I just started. It's cool. Anyway, so there's plenty of times where there's plenty of times where women do things that are intended to be sexual, and in those cases, the idea that we would sit here and the idea that we're going to just completely ignore that as it pertains to like office relationships, right? Like where women are doing things that are intentional to present like that they're doing with to project sexuality and then say, well, all the harassment is all in the fault of the men in these situations. I wouldn't excuse the sexual harassment, but what I would recognize is that there are sometimes where the things are inviting behavior. We see these things in like nightclubs. Women go to a nightclub literally wearing specific clothes, doing specific things with their faces, with their presentation, specifically for sexual invitation. This happens on a regular basis. Sometimes when you get a booty call, women present themselves with specific things with sexual presentation. So some things they can do that are sexually inviting, and I think there is a degree, and I don't know exactly where that line is, but there is a degree where sexual presentation would be inappropriate because of the response that you would be likely to get. Because, what sometimes women at an office can be sexually presenting with the intention of picking people up. Office relationships happen all the time. Office hookups happen all the time. So then it does become completely on the man to determine what exactly is this presentation. Is this presentation sexual, or is this presentation just her trying to be attractive and trying to feel good about herself? Which both, whatever. Both of them are acceptable, but it's a fuzzy line fuzzy line to try to understand. That's one thing. And then secondly, something that Stardust said that I just thought was just absolutely wrong. The idea that like women don't do a lot of the catcalling, that doesn't happen. Women don't make comments about bulges in freaking in sweatpants, and women don't grab men's junk. Like, this is just absolutely not true. And I think that's part of the thing that we're talking about as far as expanding the idea of what sexual assault is and what sexual harassment is recognizing that these things are happening to men. It's crazy to me that in this panel we can have a conversation in which people are making the statement that we're becoming more aware of what's happening to men here, and then you have somebody in the exact same space saying this doesn't happen to men at all, or this is not women don't do this, when women absolutely do this. It happens on a regular freaking basis. I don't know that it happens as frequently as it does with men, but it absolutely happens. It's absolutely inappropriate, and a lot of times you don't even know that it's inappropriate because we're just used to it. We see women doing these kind of things, we experience it, it's just whatever, that's life. And then you recognize later on, like, oh, I didn't know that was even a problem. I think a lot of women are going through that, where they're recognizing, like, wait a minute, I didn't know that these things were so inappropriate, but it's what's been happening, and you kind of normalize and accept these things. But yeah, I think that just needs to be corrected.
If I can respond to that,
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if I can respond to that, I guess I don't mean to say that it doesn't happen, right? I guess for my point of bringing that up is like for and it's obviously just anecdotal, right? Like it's not something that I would ever cross my mind, right? And it's not something that I think would cross any of my friends' minds, right? Obviously, it's fucking weird if somebody does it, and don't fucking do it because it's fucking disgusting. But I think that there definitely is like we're slowly like advocating for like more awareness for men getting assaulted. I think that like it's a very real issue that people face, right? As far as like presenting sexually, it is very complicated, it's very nuanced, right? A club is still something I would say like very different from a workplace, and I think even if it seems like somebody in the workplace is presenting in a way to get that type of attention, I feel like it's inappropriate. It's just not something that anybody should engage in.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I told you guys I don't have time to be doing this. We're already 20 minutes over time. However,
best friend.
oh my god, please. However, I think it'd be great if we could continue this conversation tomorrow after Amazon Lily. This would be a perfect time for some of these individuals, you guys, to come on and maybe have a larger discussion on this. I think that would be a great opportunity, and we could have some other women from that panel maybe stopping by for that discussion. So I think that might be a really good idea. However, we can't let this conversation continue because we are going to rate our good friend Stardust, and she can continue this conversation there. She is also streaming, but to everyone else, if you have not followed me yet, hit the follow button, hit that notification bell. We have these conversations all the time. It gets crazy like this. This just happened at the end of my stream, and it's so long. I got other stuff to do.